Daf Yomi, Bava Batra, page 173a. Bava Batra, Kuf Ayin Gimel, Amud Aleph, top of the page, with the words Ve'ela Hadatanya. Ve'ela Hadatanya Kishem She'im Motzi, Shtad Choy Zer Zeh, Kachem Motzi Acher, B'maika Miflegi. The Gemara asks, and what of that which is taught in another Braita, just as the two men named Yosef ben Shimon cannot produce a promissory note, this one against that one, so they cannot produce promissory notes against others. As those others can claim, I did not borrow from you, but from the other Yosef ben Shimon. And somehow the note he was holding is in your possession. This Braita contradicts the Mishnah, from which it was inferred that one of the two men named Yosef ben Shimon can produce promissory notes to collect the debt from others. With regard to what principle do the Mishnah and the Braita disagree? They disagree with regard to whether letters, meaning the content of a promissory note, are acquired by merely transferring the document to a new owner. In other words, they disagree about whether or not a creditor can transfer his right to collect a debt to another by merely transferring the document to him. Tana Didan Savar, the Tana of our Mishnah maintains Oisis Niknois B'Mesire. The Tana of Savar Ein Oisis Niknois B'Mesire. The Tana of our Mishnah maintains that letters are acquired by transferring the document. There is no concern that the promissory note was inadvertently transferred from one Yosef ben Shimon to the other by being lost and then found, as explained earlier. Nevertheless, there is still the possibility that one Yosef ben Shimon deliberately transferred the promissory note to the other, transferring the right of collection to him. According to this Tana, the second Yosef ben Shimon is fully entitled to collect the debt by producing the promissory note. And the Tana of the Braisa holds that the letters are not acquired by transferring the documents, so that even if one Yosef ben Shimon transferred his promissory note to the other, the new holder of the document is not entitled to collect the debt. And if you wish, say that everyone, both the Tana of the Mishnah and the Tana of the Braisa, holds that letters are acquired by transferring the document, and here they disagree with regard to whether or not the new holder of the promissory note is required to bring proof that the original creditor transferred it to him for collection, as opposed to his having received it for safekeeping or having found it by chance. The Tana of our Mishnah holds that the present holder of the document is not required to bring proof that the debt was transferred to him, and therefore he can collect the debt through the promissory note in his possession. And the Tana of the Braita holds that he is required to bring such proof, and in his absence he cannot collect the debt with the document that he now holds. Di'itma oisis niknus b'mesire. Abaya Amar Tzarech Lahirayo. The Rav Amar Ein Tzarech Lahirayo. This is as it was stated. Letters are acquired by transferring the document. Abaya says the new old holder of the document is required to bring proof that he has in fact acquired the right to collect the debt. And Rava says he's not required to bring such proof. It is assumed that if he is holding the document, it was transferred to him knowingly by the original creditor. Amar Abaye minomin le detanya echa min achin she'ashta choif yotza mitachat yodoi olav l'hoirayo mai lav hu hadin le'achine. Abaye said, from where do I say that he is required to bring proof? This is as it is taught in a Braisa in the case of one or several brothers, heirs of an estate, who has a promissory note in his possession listing a debt owed to the deceased's father, and he seeks to collect the debt for himself, it is upon him to bring proof that the document was transferred to him illegally by his father in his lifetime, or that it was bequeathed to him specifically, and he did not appropriate it from the other brothers. The Bava concludes from this: 1. Is the name not true for all others in a similar situation? In other words, whenever someone holds a promissory note that did not initially belong to him, he is required to prove that he acquired it legally. The Rav Amar Shani Achin Dishamtu Madadi. And Rava said in response, proof is not generally required in such a case, but the case of brothers who are heirs is different, as it is common for brothers who are co-heirs to seize property belonging to the estate from another. Ika de Amri Amar Rava min Aminale de Tanya Echa Menachem Sheashtar Chav Yatsa Menachas Yadai Alu Havirayo Achin Hu Nishamtu Mehadade Avalakrin Lo. There are those who say there is a different version of this exchange between Abai and Rava. According to this version, Rava said, "From where do I say that no proof is required? As is taught in a Braita, in the case of one of several brothers heirs of an estate, who has a promissory note in this possession listing a debt owed to the deceased's father, and he seeks to collect the debt for himself, it is upon him to bring proof that the document was transferred to him legally by his father in his lifetime, or that it was bequeathed to him specifically, and that he did not appropriate it from the other brothers." The implication is that it is only brothers who must bring such proof, as it is common for brothers who are co-heirs to seize property belonging to the estate from one another, but others in a similar situation do not have to bring proof that they acquired the promissory note legally. Miz dahar zehiri velo tzrichi lahavirayo kamashmela. And how to buy a counter this proof? He would say, there is no difference between brothers and anyone else. They all have to bring proof. The Braita specifies brothers because it was necessary for it to mention that case, as if it might enter your mind to say that since it is common for brothers who are co-heirs to seize property belonging to the estate from one another, one might say that they are careful to prevent such attempts, and therefore when brothers produce a promissory note, they are not required to bring proof that they obtained it legally, as it is assumed that the other brothers would not have allowed the note to escape their possession otherwise. To counter this, the Braita teaches us that brothers too must bring proof when they produce promissory notes. The Gemara returns to discuss the case of two men with the same name. But what about that which is taught in another Braita, just as the two men named Yosef and Shimon can produce a promissory note against others, so they can produce promissory notes against one another? This represents a third opinion, standing in opposition to both the Mishnah and the previous Braita. The Gemara asks with regard to what do the Mishnah and the first Braita on the one hand, and this Braita on the other disagree. Whoa, this is a long daf, man. Okay, let's see where we're holding time-wise. The Gemara answers they disagree about whether or not a scribe may write a promissory note for a debtor even if the creditor is not with him. Tanda the dan Sofer kois fin shtar de loive v'yavel pishein mavi moy zimnin de ozul legabe safre v'esahadi v'amelehu kasuvu lishtara de me'inan lemezaf mi Yosef ben Shimon chavrai ubasar de kasvi v'chasvi le nakita le v'amale hav li me'od disaft minai. The ton of our Mishnah holds that a scribe may write a promissory note for a debtor even if the creditor is not with him. The Gemara explains at times it could happen that one of the men, named Yosef ben Shimon, goes to a scribe and two witnesses, and says to them, "Write a promissory note for me, as I wish to borrow money from another Yosef ben Shimon." And then, after they write the document and sign it for him, he will take it and say to the other Yosef ben Shimon, "Give me the 100 dinars that you borrowed from me, as attested to in this document." That is the reason why the Mishnah rules that two people of the same name cannot collect a debt through a promissory note from one another, thereby preventing this occurrence. But by contrast, the Tana of the other Braita holds that a scribe may not write a promissory note for a debtor unless the creditor is with him and consents to the writing of the document. If one Yosef ben Shimon consents to the writing of the document before the other, they apparently trust one another, and there is no concern that the one holding the promissory note will defraud the other. נמצא בין שתי רויסוב שתוי של יוסף בן שמעון פרוע שטורש שניהם פרועים תימא דנמצא לא נמצא מצא מפק והנן לא אחר לא יכול להויט ידיהם שהחויב תנן. The Mishnah teaches if a document is found among one's document stating the promissory note against Yosef ben Shimon is repaid, and both men named Yosef and Shimon owed this man money, the promissory notes of both of them are considered repaid, as it cannot be determined which debt was repaid and which is outstanding. The Gemara comments, the implication of the Mishnah is that the reason this man cannot collect his debt is that this note was found among his papers, but if it is not suddenly found, rather he was always aware of its existence, he could represent the promissory note against one of the men named Yosef ben Shimon and collect the debt from him. Gemara asks, but didn't we learn earlier in the Mishnah, nor can another present a promissory note against either of them? Rav Yirmiyah said this later line in the Mishnah is stated in regards to a promissory note in which the debtors Yosef and Shimon are identified by having their names tripled, meaning that through mentioning the name of their respective grandfathers, as is explained at the end of the Mishnah. The Gemara questions this explanation, but let us see in whose name the receipt, the note stating Yosef ben Shimon's debt had been repaid, is written. Why is there uncertainty as to which Yosef ben Shimon was referred to in the document? Yehoshua said, the case is where the debtors are identified by having their names tripled in the promissory note, but the names are not tripled in the receipt. Amar Abaye Kamar Nimsa Leloi Bein Shtarois of Shtarois Yosef ben Shimon Alai Perua Shtarois Ben Shneyen Peruin Baya stated a different answer to the question that the mission is speaking of the debtor, not the creditor, and this is what it is saying. If a receipt is found among the debtor's documents stating the promissory note of Yosef ben Shimon against me has been repaid, and this debtor has borrowed money from both men named Yosef ben Shimon, the promissory notes of both of them are considered repaid, meaning that they are not valid for collection, as it cannot be determined which debt was paid and which one was outstanding. In case of Yasu, Yishalshu, Vichule Tanaim, Hayush Nein Kohanim, Yichdevu Doyois. The Mishnah teaches what should two people do with the same name in a single city do in order to conduct their business. They should triple their names by writing 3 generations. Joseph ben Shimon, Ben, so and so. If their grandfathers' names are identical and they have no prominent physical difference to indicate who is the one listed in the document, then they write that the one referred to in the document is a priest, and if that is the case, the sages taught the following continuation of the Mishnah in a Batra. If both of them were priests, they should write several generations of ancestors until a divergence in names is found that can serve as a means of identification. Mishnah, the new Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Ha'omer livno shtar bein shtarosai parua ve'en yodea ezehu shtaros kulam proi nimtza echad shom shnayim hagadol parua ve'akatan ena parua." The Mishnah says, in a case of one who says to his son before dying, "One promissory note among the promissory notes in my possession is repaid, but I do not know which one. The promissory note of all those who owe him money are considered repaid," meaning that they are not all valid for collection, as it cannot be determined which debt was paid and which are outstanding. If there were found among his papers 2 promissory notes owed by one person, the one is greater. The one for the greater amount is considered repaid, and the one for the smaller amount is not considered repaid, and it can be collected. The debtor is favored in the case of an uncertainty. Amarava shtar lecha biyado perua gadol perua v'katan perua chayvet lecha biyadi perua shtarois kulam peroin. Gemara now. Rava says that if a creditor says to a debtor who borrowed money twice from him, one promissory note of the 2 that I paid yours is in my possession is repaid, without specifying which, the one for the greater amount is considered repaid, and the one for the small amount is not considered repaid, and can be collected. If the collector said instead the debt of yours that I have my possession is repaid, all the promissory notes this creditor has from his debtor are considered repaid, as the term of the debtor covers all loans at once. Ravina said to Rava, if so, then when one makes an ambiguous statement, it is interpreted to his detriment. Does the same halacha apply to sales? If a seller of land writes a document for a purchaser stating my field is hereby sold to you, without specifying which of his 2 fields he is referring to is the larger field that's sold to him, and if he writes a document for the purchaser stating the field that I have sold to you, is it so that all his fields are sold to him, as the Hebrew word for field can refer to several fields as well as a single field? Hasam Yad Bal Hashtar Ala Tachtona. Rava says the holder of the document of the sale is at a disadvantage, as it is he who seeks to take more property from the seller and must accept the minimal meaning. Here too, in the case of promissory notes, it is the holder of the document, the creditor, who seeks to collect more money from the debtor. Therefore, the creditor is at a disadvantage. New Mishnah. The one who lends money to another with the assurance of a guarantor cannot collect the debt from the guarantor.